Honey, are you seriously using coupons right now? In front of everyone. Aunt Renee's voice cut right through the noise of the restaurant, loud, sharp, designed to be heard. I looked up from my phone. Every single face at that table turned toward me. Some looked away fast, some smirked. Nobody said a word in my defense. Not one person. Then Derek leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with this big grin on his face. I told y'all she was struggling, bless her heart. The table erupted. Light laughter, the kind that's meant to sting. I just smiled, quietly, calmly, because what happened next, none of them saw coming. My name is Camille. I'm 34 years old, and I want to tell you exactly how that night ended, because the ending is something I still think about when I need to remind myself why I never explained myself to people who never really asked. I grew up the middle child in a family that loved labels. My older brother was the athlete, my younger sister was the pretty one, and me, I was just there, quiet, steady, easy to overlook. My family wasn't cruel, but they were loud and status obsessed in the way that some families are, where what you drive and where you work and how you spend your money becomes a measuring stick for your worth as a person. After college, I took a retail management job. The pay wasn't impressive. My family made sure I knew that. Retail? My uncle said at Thanksgiving one year. That's a starter job, Camille. When are you getting a real career? I smiled and passed the sweet potatoes. I had learned early that explaining yourself to people who weren't really listening was just wasted energy. What I didn't tell him was that I was studying every single day on that job. I was learning how products moved, how margins worked, how consumers behaved. I was saving aggressively, investing quietly, and building a plan that I didn't share with anyone at that dinner table. Over 10 years, I built something real, something significant, but nobody in my family paid close enough attention to notice. I wasn't the one they bragged about, but I was the one building something real, right under their noses. And if you've ever been written off by your own family for living simply or thinking small, you already understand exactly how this story feels from the inside. Have you ever been called broke by the same people who never invested a single dollar in their lives? If that question just hit you somewhere deep, subscribe right now. Drop your story in the comments because I genuinely want to read it. We're building something here together. Click hype and let's go. Now, let me take you back to that dinner, because the coupon moment was not where this story started. It was just where everything finally cracked open. Every year, Uncle Roy hosted the family dinner at a restaurant downtown. It was always the same unspoken tradition. People arrived dressed up, talked about their jobs and their vacations and their new purchases, and somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, the family quietly ranked each other. Who was doing well? Who was falling behind? It was never said out loud. It didn't need to be. That particular night, Aunt Renee announced before the check arrived that she was treating everyone. She said it the way she always said generous things, with maximum volume and minimum subtlety. She pulled out her credit card and held it up like a trophy. What she didn't see was that I was already on my phone, applying a coupon I had saved in my app. It was a habit, an automatic reflex. My companies collectively save millions through smart purchasing decisions, and that discipline started with me personally, with my own money years ago. Using a coupon at a restaurant where Aunt Renee was already covering the bill was genuinely just habit. It wasn't even about the money anymore. But Derek saw it. He pointed across the table. "She's couponing at a family dinner," he laughed, and looked around to make sure everyone was watching. "Camille, Davy, we can spot you the $20. It's okay." The laughter spread fast. My cousin Tisha covered her mouth. Two of my aunts exchanged a look. My mother, sitting 3 seats away from me, looked down at her plate, like she was suddenly very interested in her last bite of salmon. I kept my face even. I put my phone face down on the table. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. What none of them knew in that moment was that the restaurant we were sitting in was part of a hospitality group, a group that my holding company had quietly acquired a minority stake in 14 months earlier. I had eaten at this restaurant before, many times, and I had used a coupon every single time. Because I could, because I understood, more than anyone at that table, that wealth isn't about performing spending. It's about knowing exactly where every dollar goes. I set my glass down, and I made a quiet decision. Okay, they want a show? I'll give them one. The days after that dinner were quieter in a way that felt deliberate. I noticed I wasn't getting the usual random texts from family members, the funny videos, the check-ins. I figured people were just busy. Then my cousin Jade accidentally texted me directly, trying to reply to a thread she thought she was in. "Wait, you're not even in this chat anymore?" she wrote. Then a second later, "Oh no, ignore that, sorry." I asked her what chat she meant. She went quiet for a few minutes. Then she sent me a screenshot by mistake. The family group chat had been renamed. It was called Successful Ones now, and I was not been added back. I stared at my phone for a long time. Not because I wanted to be in that chat, I was fine without it. What I kept coming back to was the image of my mother seeing that new name, seeing that I wasn't included, and saying nothing. Not a text to me, not a quiet word to anyone, nothing. That was a lonelier feeling than being excluded. A few weeks later, I went to my cousin Brianna's birthday dinner. Derek was there, and he was already deep into his favorite topic, himself. He'd been working on a clothing brand for about 8 months. He had a logo and an Instagram page and a lot of enthusiasm, and the family treated it like he was building the next great American company. My aunts asked questions, my uncle nodded along, everyone leaned in. Someone turned to me at some point, almost as an afterthought. "What are you up to these days, Camille? Still doing the retail thing?" "Retail and some investments," I said simply. I didn't expand. I never did. Derek didn't even let a full second pass. "Investments?" he grinned. "Girl, buying store-brand cereal doesn't count as investing." The table laughed again. Same sound as the restaurant. Warm for him, sharp for me. I looked at Derek and smiled the same smile I had given them at dinner. "You're probably right," I said. I let him have it. I was keeping score in a different way. The third thing happened at a barbecue at Uncle Roy's house about a month after Brianna's dinner. Roy pulled me aside near the back of the yard, away from the music and the smoke from the grill. His voice dropped the way it did when he was about to ask for something. He told me Derek's clothing brand needed funding to get to the next level, a small business loan. He said the bank needed a co-signer with solid financial standing. He looked at me with this particular expression, the one that was supposed to make me feel chosen and important. "You've always been responsible, Camille. You understand how money works. This is family." I asked him what the loan amount was. He told me. It was not a small number. I was quiet for a moment. Then I told him, as gently as I could, that I wasn't in a position to co-sign. Roy's face shifted immediately. The warmth drained right out of it. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they've already decided what they think of you. "All right," he said. "That's fine." And he walked back to the grill. By the end of the barbecue, I overheard 2 of my aunts talking in the kitchen. One of them said, "Camille's always been a little selfish. Always has been." I drove home that night with the windows down. The air smelled like cut grass and neighborhood charcoal. I turned the radio off and just drove in the quiet. They only came to me when they needed something, but they never once asked what I was building. Here is what they didn't know. For the past 6 years, I had been the anonymous owner of a regional grocery chain called Fresh Mart, 7 stores across the metro area, operating under a parent holding company with my initials buried quietly in the LLC filings. I hadn't put my name on any of it publicly. That was intentional. I'd learned early that when people know what you have, they stop seeing who you are. My family shopped at Fresh Mart regularly. Aunt Renee loved the prepared foods section. Derek had complained once at a family dinner that Fresh Mart's parking lot was always too crowded. My uncle bought his coffee there every single morning on the way to work. Every time they swiped their cards at Fresh Mart, they were putting money into my account. Beyond Fresh Mart, I held equity positions in 2 other regional retail brands. The coupon habit wasn't nostalgia or budget pressure. It was research. every time I used a coupon, I was watching how the app performed, how the discount affected behavior, how the customer experience felt from the inside. I was always working, even when it looked like I was just being frugal. I had started quietly documenting things, screenshots of Derek's public comments, the voicemail Uncle Roy left me after the barbecue, where his tone was notably less warm, text messages. I wasn't planning anything dramatic, I was just being careful, the way I had always been careful, about everything. My attorney, Mr. Ellison, had been telling me for months that it was getting close to time. I first met Harold Ellison when I was 24 years old. I had walked into his office with a business plan printed on 22 pages of copy paper, a modest amount in savings, and an idea for my first store. He was 60 years old then, already a significant figure in regional commercial real estate law, and he had no reason to take a meeting with me. But he did, and when I finished my pitch, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You're not asking me if this is a good idea. You already know it's a good idea. You're asking me to help you do it right." He had been my attorney and closest advisor ever since. After the barbecue, I called him. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which was always his way. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Camille, you've been quiet long enough. You don't owe them your silence anymore." He told me that the editor of a regional business journal had reached out to his office again. They had been trying for 2 years to identify and profile the anonymous owner of Freshmart. The story had been described to him as one of the most compelling regional business narratives the journal had ever come across. A woman building quietly, no press, no announcement, just results. I had declined 3 times. Mr. Ellison had relayed my answer politely each time. "Let them write it," he said now. "Don't make a production out of it. Just let the story exist. Let the truth do what it does." I thought about it for 2 days. Then I called him back and said yes. While I was sitting for interviews and reviewing drafts, my family was organizing the launch party for Derek's clothing brand. They set a date, they pooled money together to help cover the venue, they posted about it on social media with captions like "supporting our own" and "so proud of this family." Relatives who had never once asked about my work were sharing flyers for Derek's event. I was not invited. I found out the same way I found out about the group chat, by accident through a post I wasn't supposed to see. They were so busy celebrating him, they forgot to watch what I was doing. The article published on a Tuesday morning. The title was clean and direct. "The Woman Behind Freshmart: How One Quiet Investor Built a 7-Store Grocery Empire Before 35. My name was in the second paragraph. There was a photo. The piece ran nearly 3,000 words and traced the entire arc, from my first store at 24 to the current portfolio, including my equity stakes and the holding company structure. It was factual, detailed, and impossible to dismiss. I had already silenced most of my notifications by the time it went live. My phone still found ways to let me know what was happening. Missed calls stacked up, text message previews blinked past before I could dismiss them. A mutual family friend had shared the article directly into the Successful Ones group chat. I know this because my cousin Jade, the same one who had accidentally texted me before, called me that afternoon, breathing fast, saying, "Camille, the chat is on fire right now. People are losing their minds." Derek texted me directly for the first time in weeks. "Is this real? Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at that message for a long time. I thought about every dinner, every comment at every table, every laugh that was meant to make me feel smaller. I thought about my mother looking down at her plate. I thought about Uncle Roy's voice going cold in the barbecue yard. I typed back 4 words. "You didn't ask." Then I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to a lease agreement I was reviewing. Aunt Renee called twice. When I listened to the voicemail later, her voice had a warmth in it that I didn't recognize, soft, almost careful. She said she was so proud of me, that she always knew I was going to do something big, and that she hoped we could get together soon. I saved the voicemail and said nothing. Uncle Roy sent a long text, paragraphs. He explained that the cosign conversation was never meant to be pressure, that it was just a casual discussion between family, that he hoped he understood he had always respected what I was doing. I took a screenshot of that text and added it to a folder I had been keeping. Then I put my phone back down. I didn't call anyone back that day. I didn't post anything. I didn't announce anything. The reporter had asked me, near the end of our final interview, what kept me grounded after all of it, the growth, the complexity, the scale of what I'd built. I had thought about the question genuinely before answering. I never stopped using coupons. Why would I? Every dollar saved is a dollar that works for me. That line made it into the article. It was the closing sentence. I did not chase any of the sudden warmth that came flooding in after the article published. I wasn't cold about it. I just wasn't interested in performing a reconciliation that hadn't been earned. When people showed you clearly who you were when they thought you had nothing, you didn't owe them a front row seat to what you built. The new Fresh Mart location opened 3 months later. It was in the same neighborhood as Uncle Roy's house, the same street where that barbecue had been held. The grand opening was covered by the same regional journal, small piece, just a paragraph, but it was there. My mother called me the week before the opening. It was a different kind of call than the others. Her voice was quieter. She didn't pretend. She said she was sorry for the plate moment at the restaurant, that she knew exactly what she had done by going silent, and that she didn't have a good excuse for it. I listened. I told her I appreciated her saying it. I told her I wasn't closing any doors, but that things were going to be different going forward, and that I needed her to understand that. She said she did. I kept the door open. 1 inch. Earned, not assumed. The calls and texts from Derek and Renee and Roy, the ones full of sudden pride and reconnection energy, I answered some of them briefly and let the rest go, politely, without drama, without explanation. They called me broke because I used coupons. What they didn't understand was that the people who build real wealth never stop thinking about where every dollar goes. Not once, not ever. I still use the coupon app. Every time. Walking through my own stores, phone in hand, living the same discipline that built everything I have. That's not poverty. That's exactly the point. If you've ever been embarrassed for being smart with money by people who spend more than they have and call it success, I want you to know that you are not alone and you are not wrong. Have you ever been mocked for being careful, for clipping coupons, for driving the modest car, for saying no to things you could technically afford but chose not to buy? Tell me your story in the comments. I'm reading every single one. This community is built for the quiet builders, the ones doing the real work while everyone else performs. Subscribe and become part of that, and click hype to help this story reach the person who needs to hear it today. Standing up for yourself when no one is watching, staying disciplined when people are laughing at you, building in silence while others demand your applause, that takes a specific kind of strength that most people will never understand. If you've lived that, subscribe and come be part of this community. Let me know this story meant something to you by clicking hype, and tell me where you're watching from. I mean it. I love seeing how far these stories travel.